Hey, thanks for joining us on the Invisible Strength podcast. Today's guest is no stranger to adversity. At the young age of 16, her family home was destroyed in a fire, and an early marriage led to devastating domestic violence, leaving her feeling broken and lacking self-worth. But she did not let that define her. She cultivated invisible strength through grit, grace, and self-compassion. She's now the founder of Thriving by Nature and empowering others to rise above their struggles. Bethany, we are so happy to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
And if you're new here, I'm Karen Wagner, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Chris Burton. Chris, how you doing today?
Be with you as always, Karen, and an honor to speak with you as well, Bethany.
This will be fun.
Bethany, there is a lot to unpack with your story, but you can't unpack that all within the first 30 seconds of someone meeting you. So how do you introduce yourself and talk about your work and who you are for people who are just getting to know you for the first time?
Well, how I introduce myself is not by saying all the things that we just talked about, because,
Right.
you usually push those down. Don't want to unpack it all and scare everyone away.
Mm-hmm.
So usually what I do is I just tell them, I am a Montessori educator of 23 years. And now I am an adult Montessori teacher, basically. And I am a mindset and life skills coach. And it's interesting because I've taken my life and Montessori, which has really supported me, just that philosophy through everything, and adapted that into a coaching that is applicable for people to learn the life skills that they need to really thrive in their lives in 5 different areas: emotional, spiritual, physical, social, and intellectual, and how to incorporate that in their lives. And I don't just speak from an educational background, I speak from experience background.
Bethany, for those who aren't familiar with the Montessori approach, can you explain that a bit more?
Yes. So in the 1800s, there was a woman called Maria Montessori, and she was one of the very first women doctors in Rome. And the men did not like her. And so they would isolate her, and she would be able to work on, the cadavers at night. And she could only get her studies done at night because the men didn't want to work with her. Once she graduated, she was sent to work in the children's houses. Now, what that was it was a home where kids that didn't quite fit the norm and weren't perfect fit in the box kids, they'd go to these children's homes. And she was watching them, and she realized that there was nothing wrong with them. Their needs were just not being met. So she ended up creating a curriculum and supporting them exactly where they were at and meeting their physical, emotional, even spiritual needs, and meeting them where they were at, not having them fit in a box. I love the expression of, Montessori is a lot of, teaching somebody to love all of their edges rather than sanding them down, because that's how people thrive. And so this curriculum and this theory, this educational theory, has lived on for that long, and it is worldwide. It's not as huge in the US as it is in other countries, but it's picking up traction because people are understanding that you don't have to conform the way that you think. And it's a really beautiful way to just see different angles of different perspectives. And the theory is just so holistic and encompassing and supporting in every aspect of my life, adults' lives, children's lives. And when you become a true Montessori educator, it's like a mantle that you take on. It's like it oozes out of you. It is like people know, you must be a Montessori teacher. I'm like, yeah, I am. You can't hide it because you just have taken this on.
I'm thinking about just the importance of embodied learning and how, unfortunately, so many of our children don't have an opportunity to experience the sort of embodied learning that a system of education like Montessori provides. Talk to us a bit about how you see that translating into adulthood and the sorts of adults that come out of not being able to have received embodied learning, and why you're emphasizing this whole notion of being an adult Montessori educator as well.
So what I've realized, I've taught children for 23 years, and the kids that I was teaching back when I was young to now are now the kids that are having kids. That is a weird concept for me, number one, right? Because they come to me when they're 5, 6, 7, whatever.
Right.
And now they are the ones that are having these children. It has been very interesting to see the shift, because the kids that I saw 10 years ago are not the same kids that are coming through now. The entire shift of everything is that we are losing ourselves. And so I saw this in children. And when my son got sick and I needed to transition and I moved into a coaching space, I knew what I wanted to do in a sense because I saw the lapse. I saw what happened. And I can only help children in a classroom so much. If I really wanted to make a huge impact, I needed to go to the parents. And because there is a disconnect, there's all these life skills that we are not learning anymore. Within the last 10 years, the life skills of being patient and creating boundaries, communication, these are gone. Conflict resolution, peace education, these life skills don't exist anymore. People are really struggling, being overwhelmed and stressed. And I'm like, we don't have to be. But it's a life skill that we didn't learn because this disconnect happened in the process of just growing up and the shift of education in the last 10, 15 years. So I knew that if I really wanted to help the children, I needed to go to the parents because they're going to make the greatest impact.
Bethany, I have alluded to the skills that we're losing over time. How are you helping adults truly understand what thriving means and cultivate those skills so that they're able to deal with challenges in a healthy way?
Well, because I've experienced this myself where have totally lost myself due to a lot of the things that we talked about at the very beginning, abusive marriage, things like that. That was the one that really, I think, broke me and made me really dig deep onto what I had inside. And I realized people will talk about this, but there are certain areas in our life that we have to nurture and we forget about that. And so what I specifically do is the emotional, the spiritual, the physical, the social, and the intellectual. There are actually studies that show that when you nurture each one of these areas, you don't have the stress and the overwhelm because you're balanced. You have a deeper understanding of where you're at, not hoping that you're someplace else. And understanding and giving yourself grace, that's something we don't do anymore either. Sometimes we are just, you know what? My body is just not physically capable. It's okay. Giving ourselves grace and knowing that that is how I'm feeling myself. And each one of these, I call them the 5 buckets of self-care, actually, because I'm a teacher. There's a terrible children's song. I do not like this children's song, but it's like, it's that song, there's a hole in your bucket. Do you know this song?
Yes. I haven't heard it in a long time.
Oh, yes. I do not like this song and I would never teach it. And it talks about there's a hole in your bucket and dear Lila, right? And then they stick straw and hay and rocks and all these mud in this hole and they never fix that bucket. Ever. The song ends and there's a hole in the bucket. I'm like, well, what did this song teach children? This is a terrible song. You can do everything and they're still going to have a hole. So I decided I was naming my course or whatever, the 5 buckets of self-care because number 1, I wanted to fix that song. That was more of a personal issue. But number 2, we have to fill each bucket so that it can pour into the next one. And it's a base that you create. I start with the emotional base because if you do not understand the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional awareness, you're not going to be able to have a firm foundation to move forward because your emotions are always going to be convoluted with stories. There's facts and there's stories. And if we are living in our stories all the time, we're not living in the emotional awareness of what's really happening. And that bucket, once you have that down, pours into your spiritual self-care. And that is your grounding. That is your meditation. That is understanding that there's a power higher than you. That is centering yourself. That is so important. And when you can do that, then you pour into your physical self-care. I'm also a ballroom dance instructor and a bungee fitness instructor. And I do a lot of nutrition. And so you cannot work on physical self-care. So many people don't understand why things just keep getting sabotaged in their lives. I start January 1st and I start exercising and by the 6th I'm done, right? Well, it's because there's a process of a foundation that you have to build. If you don't understand your why, you're not going to be able to fill that physical self bucket. And there's so much in there. There's, you have your movement, your sleep, your rest, your hydration, your diet, as well as your environment. those things are so important. Your environment is something we don't talk about, and that's very Montessori influenced as well, how our environment plays such a huge role in everything that we do. And then that pours into your social self-care, which is your boundaries, your communication. And those things, you can't fill those unless you've already have love for yourself. That's why you work on that. Because if you don't love yourself, you cannot have a good relationship and pour into other people. Like there is a disconnect, and that has to pour into then, after you have that pours into your intellectual self-care, which is so important because your intellectual self-care is that fire that you have within to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep the curiosity alive. And basically that keeps us young. I'm pretty sure that is the secret key to keep us young. But, all of those have to be balanced. And that's how I teach that. And when people go through my 5 self-care buckets, they end up with what is called a better me list. So it's like, specifically, this is also very Montessori because it's all about, following them. There's about 53 different life skills within these 5 buckets. Not everybody needs 53. Some of them just need 10, 12. And you create that list of what you want to work on every single day to fill up these buckets. And you already have your roadmap. Like that is what you need. And some people don't understand how to get that. And I just teach the clarity and the life skills on how to do that.
Bethany, so much of what you're saying is making me think about all of the obstacles that stand in the way, whether it's, emotional regulation or dysregulation because of trauma, all the ways in which our nervous systems are overstimulated, and even your emphasis on environment and thinking about how many young people and adults are not in environments that provide stability or safety. So I'm curious, how does your pedagogical approach handle these things, these sort of like external elements that, go beyond a sort of like the control for the experiment, so to speak, where, we can be focusing on our own inner peace, but externally there's so much chaos around us?
Yeah, this is when I do think compartmentalizing is basically survival skill at the moment, because we cannot control we cannot always control our environments, just like you're saying, especially if you are a young person in not a great environment, correct? You can't always control that, but we always do have the autonomy to choose. And that is the difference. We have the autonomy to choose what we want, even if it's just our bed. What do we want our bed to look like? This can be the environment that we have control over. And it's shifting your thought processes to things that you can control. I may not be able to control any of this, but I can control this. I can control how I organize my books in my binder. I can control how I take my notes. I can control how, I show up every day. I can control what I wear. And it's taking those shifts and realizing there are things you always have a choice. It's finding that choice and finding that control, because we are all going to be in situations. I mean, I've been in situations where there are things that I could not control, and taking that step back and realizing, hey, I don't have control. And I feel when you feel like you don't have control, and when you feel that heavy pressure and that stress and that just overwhelm and just that lost and stuck and you can't progress and just overwhelming pressure on your heart and on your mind. And that's when you have to just take that deep breath and just step back. I always say 3 steps back and observe what you have. And when you can take those 3 steps back and be like, okay, like even if we're having a bad day, we're human. We're going to have bad days. What can I control? You know what? I can control that at least my kids are going to be fed today, and I'm calling that a win. You know what? We can control that. I can call somebody that is something you can control. Sometimes it's out of our ability, but there's always something.
We often talk about how you defined a rhythm living with autoimmune conditions, because to your point, there are those different buckets that you need to fill, and there is a balance. And that word balance can be really scary for some people because it just seems like you're trying to juggle so much. How do you help people with the tug of war of all these different demands?
So this is where the shift comes in. It's being okay. You have to be okay with you. So many times I think that our biggest enemy is ourselves. We are the ones that are holding ourselves in this invisible accountability over here. Like we have this invisible bar up here that if we're not reaching, we are now beating up ourselves inside. But nobody sees that but us. Nobody sees that bar except for us. And it's taking that moment to be like, you know what? That bar right now is not reachable. And that's okay, because tomorrow I'll probably be able to reach it. So today I'm just going to hang on to these handles right here. And this is all I can do. And these handles are just fine. And it's, taking that step, because reframing, there's so much power in the reframe. And we don't have a lot of that. We're not taught the skill of reframing easily anymore. That is not something that comes easily to a lot of people, because what comes easily are the words that we heard when we were children or going through things like, why can't you do this? That's not good enough. You can do more. Get up. What's wrong with you? I mean, this is what we hear, which isn't reality. These are stories. This is the stories that have been ingrained in us. And those stories that have been ingrained in us always are the ones that surface to the top. It's us taking a step back and looking underneath that.
I love that you're lifting this up, because as a father of young children, I often think about how the words and the actions that my wife and I are saying were helping to frame and form our children's inner voice. So I'm curious about your approach and how your work helps adults address that inner voice and sort of like, whether it's retraining or listening to something else. How do you engage with all of those words that you're just talking about that help frame our worldview so strongly, for better or for ill?
The thing with adults is, well, it's same with children too, but not as big of a need for kids. So with children, they're always going to ask you, well, why? Why? Well, why? Tell me why. Guess what? We will try to answer those questions. And finally, we're just like, just because I said so. Hey, just because. And we just are like, we're done.
Yeah.
But as adults, we stop asking why. We stop. And when we start re-asking ourselves why, and we find out the why, when we're understanding why we need to reframe, why am I thinking this? Why do I? And we start giving ourselves those same questions. This is how you deal with adults. We're just big kids. Let's be honest. We are just really big kids.
Yeah.
That's all. This is the truth.
Yeah.
I decided I'm not ever going to get old. That's just not going to happen. Because we just all are really big kids. We just stop asking the questions. And now we have to ask ourselves the questions. We don't have to ask our moms and our dads anymore. Now we have to ask ourselves. And now we have to be like, well, why do I think that? Why? Yeah, you're welcome.
What was like the first shift or moment that helped you take a step back and really think about your situation and realize some of these lessons that you're sharing with us?
So we talked about when my house burned down. That is an interesting, this was the first, at 16, this was a very critical age, because, friends are everything. You think that you are a grown up and you're not. Don't love your parents. This is just a rough age in the first place. But I was 16 when my house burned down. And I was one of the only ones that wasn't there. I was actually at a ballroom dance competition. I was at nationals, and my dance partner and I had gotten to the finals. And so, it's the last 6 people were going to be placed. I got second, by the way, which is pretty good.
Congrats.
Anyways, thank you. Long time ago. But I knew when I was dancing the finals, something was really, really off. Because people were looking around at each other and whispering to each other. And I had some people crying, and everyone was not talking to me. And when they did talk to me, they looked sad, because nobody wanted to tell me that my house had burned down 2 hours before I was dancing. So I didn't even know. But that feeling in the air, the heavy feeling of something is off.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was there. It was thick. I danced. We did everything. We placed second. And right after, it was my uncle who came up to me and gave me a big hug, wearing my medal around my neck, and gives me a big hug. And he's like, Bethany, I need to tell you something. There was a fire and you should need to call your parents. So call my parents. They tell me everything. So in the town that I grew up in, there's only about 1,000 people. And because there was only 1,000 people and it was a big snowstorm and everything else, the roads are closed. And it's very frequently -20. this part of Idaho is very, very cold and non-forgiving in the winter. And so because the fire department is all volunteer, everyone was snowed in. Nobody could get to the house. And so the only thing that was left was a roof, just a roof. And it was pretty devastating to come home to. But at the same time, all of my family had lived through it. And it was an electrical fire in the walls, and the house was almost 100 years old, all caught on fire at the same time, and there was nothing they could do. So they all moved in with my grandma. Now, I've never felt so guilty in my life for having things because I had stuff from being at the dance competition. I had makeup and, just random things. But my family they didn't have a toothbrush, a change of underwear, nothing. And in this small town, the nearest town at that time to get anything was about 40 minutes away. And there was only a Walmart, and it was a small Walmart back then. So the entire town pulled together and they gave us things. It was amazing. My friends gave me the best clothes out of their closets, and it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. But this is where the shift happened. When something like that happens, you just feel like everything is just gone and dead and done. You just are you don't know what to do next. And I was there. In a 2 weeks' time, I was supposed to be competing they called it Junior Miss at the time. Now it's called Distinguished Young Women's. It's a scholarship program that they do through the schools. And you have a formal, what is it called? Poison appearance and academics and fitness. And you do all these categories, except for swimsuit. You don't do swimsuit because it's high school. Anyways, but you do all these things, and I wasn't going to do it anymore. I was dropping out because, you just feel that heavy weight of everything. I had no dress. I had no talent. It was all gone. Everything that I had was gone. My mom had sewn me my dress. It was burned up, everything. And golly, this story is hard for me sometimes to talk about. Anyways, all of my friends in the small town was like, no, you're doing this. I'm like, we cannot do this. In front of my house, well, my grandmother's house, because we're all crammed into my grandmother's house. And there's 7 kids and my parents. We were not a small family. Outside of the door, there was an envelope that said, Bethany, go get a dress. And there's $400 in it. I went and I got a dress. I threw together a talent. I sang do you know that show, Anastasia, Journey to the Past? And I used all these old clothes out of my grandma's closet to reenact the old Anastasia look with all of her baggy clothing. And I sang, I did the whole thing. And it was that was fine. It was at the interview. That's when I really had this shift of perspective, because I was the very first one in. And you go into this room and there's a panel of judges, and they asked me, they said, what does your room look like right now? That was the first question they asked me. I was the very first one in there. I started hysterically crying, ugly crying, snot, noises that were not awesome, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what was wrong. They had no idea. They had no context. They had asked me just a first question. I ended up just standing up and leaving. Number one, the look on the other girls' faces was, I will never forget that. Coming out of an interview room and them being scared out of their minds because I just came out bawling and crying because they have no idea what happened.
Right. They're next.
And they're all next. They had no idea what was going on. I'm like, good luck. They're bitter, brutal in there. No. Anyways, I just ended up leaving. Now, the shift that I got and the perspective that I got and the strength that I got from that was that no matter how bad or how hard things look, number one, people don't understand everything that you're always going through. They can't see it. Those judges didn't see that. They had no idea. It still affected me dramatically, obviously. But regardless of that, I still showed up with support and understanding the power of support, the power of just pushing through even though you don't want to. And it was really hard. And the knowledge of, not holding a grudge because they didn't know. They had no idea. And then being able to take those lessons that I just learned there and apply them throughout my life. Because I've reflected on that multiple times. I ended up getting Spirit of Junior Miss, which was a really cool award to get because that is one that all the girls vote on, and anyways, and they all voted me to have this. And come to find out, a lot of these girls that were in this competition were the ones that were giving me clothes. It's the support. It's the love that we sometimes don't see. And taking that love and realizing that sorry.
All good.
There's people that love you, even during hard times. Sometimes we forget to see the love because we're so caught up in the sadness and the misery and the pity party that we are now creating that we forget to see the love and we forget to forgive for the ignorance. And those lessons have really carried me like through a lot.
Saying is just so tremendously powerful for several reasons. One that sticks out to me is just the demonstration of kindness, especially during adolescence, where sometimes kindness can be hard to find amongst teenagers. But how has that impacted you being the recipient of such kindness? And also, in what ways have you discovered being kind to yourself?
I think being kind to yourself is actually the hardest thing to do. But being the recipient of kindness, this makes you shift your perspective. Because when people are so kind to you, you automatically want to return that. You
Right.
automatically want to reach out. It's a reciprocated thing, even though you may not be able to do it right away. I found out who gave me that $400 later, the one for my dress. And it was a little old lady. And I ended up making her a cake. After the whole competition, I didn't even know I had this like sweet woman cheering me on. I had no idea. I didn't even know her very well. And so I made her a special Swiss cake that took me a while to make and everything and brought it over to her and thanked her. And that knowledge and that reciprocation that I was able to give, it fills you in a way that you can never express and it makes you want to keep giving. And I think that sometimes we forget the magic of giving. Because I think we're in a very much so just collect, mine, like mentality. And that's not fulfilling at all. I mean, you can get as much stuff as you want, but you're just putting it into a bottomless pit. If you want to actually be fulfilled, it's giving it back.
Yeah.
And then you fill. And that was a lesson that I learned. And then the other side of this question is like just loving myself too, like forgiving myself and realizing that I'm okay just the way I am. There's a lot of like when I was a teacher at a really prestigious school in Utah, there was my assistant. She didn't like me at all. I was a lead teacher. We did not get along. And she even told me, she goes, Bethany, you always dress so frumpy. And she would tell me that I didn't put on enough makeup. I mean, she was like a really like mean girl. And I'm like, we're grown-ups.
Yeah.
We're grown-ups. Like, what is this happening? I was so shocked. I was really shocked, but apparently this happens. I was really blown out of the water. Now, lessons I had learned when I was younger, right, made me really think about this. And I decided that I didn't really care when I was working with her, that I didn't wear the nicest clothes. Because guess what? I wasn't afraid to get on the floor with the children.
Right.
I wasn't afraid to play with them.
Yeah.
I wasn't afraid. And I wore my hair in a ponytail because guess what? I didn't want boogers all over in my hair.
Makes sense.
There's reasons.
Fair enough.
And guess what? Like there's purpose behind this. And she didn't want to be on the floor. She did not engage. And the year went on and, I just was always happy and positive. And I took this back. I took those 3 steps back and looked in and being like, why? Why? And I realized my why. And then her words didn't matter anymore. I didn't care what she said because I knew why I was doing what I was doing. I knew the purpose behind everything. And then I was able to love myself. Well, at the end of the school year, we had ended up being good friends. And she told me that she had learned so much from me and thanked me for being such a good example to her. Now, I think sometimes we get so caught up in everybody's thoughts of what everyone else is thinking that we forget that if we just shine from within, that's all we need to do. We just need to be us. We don't have to fit into anybody else's box.
I appreciate you bringing it up because earlier you talked about the power of community and the importance of the support. And there's remarkable, kind people out there who can help us through some of the toughest of situations. But we have to remember that everyone hasn't gone through experiences and learned some of the life skills that maybe we've had to early on because of our various circumstances. And the power of boundaries and understanding where your why and your purpose to deflect some of that negative energy. What are some of the ways in which or experiences that you've interacted with people that have helped you through some of the more trying times?
I think that we go through this, I call it the vicious cycle. And I actually have a I've made a visual of this. And I think it's more of a funnel. We have that negative thought, and that negative thought affects our body. We start looking down, we start being hunched over, and the people start asking us if we're okay. And instantly we lie to them and we tell them we're fine. We
Yep.
just lie. I'm good.
Real
I'm
quick.
great. I know. We just lie because nobody wants to admit, I'm really tired. I'm really overwhelmed right now. I have a lot of things going on. And if I just say I'm fine, then I don't have to have this conversation with you because the emotional drain of just this conversation and me thinking of it is too much for me right now.
Oh.
That is why we lie. But understanding that if we continue on this vicious cycle, that lie then leads to us closing in on ourselves and leads to us not taking care of ourselves and leads to us closing in on opportunity and not reaching the expectation and just the goals that we could be reaching, because we're just kind of living in this, I don't know, fog of funk. I don't know what it is. We're just living in it and taking the perspective of sometimes it takes somebody else to take your hand and pull you out of that. And sometimes it takes us to be courageous enough to reach out and talk to somebody else, ask if they'll hold our hands and get us out of it. Because we want to do everything ourselves. We are a prideful people. We just want to we are fine. We are going to lie and I got this. But you don't. It's going to keep going around and you're going to get socked into it. You need to, there's a couple of things to get out of this, but it is going to be community and reaching out. And it's also going to be talking to people and finding gratitude within the situation that you're in. And when you can do that, then you can move out. But until you do that and have support, you're just going to be in the fog of funk.
I hear that. How do we, in your estimation, endeavor to take that first step? Because there's so much, and as you were describing those interactions where we don't want to tell people how we're actually doing, I imagine and visualize like a protective shell. How do we climb out of those protective shells and actually engage with each other in a way that actually promotes the sort of healing that you're talking about? Like, how do we take that first step?
Well, we turn around. I like to take the perspective that, I don't know if you've ever seen this graphic, but there's a guy and he's digging a hole and he's really trying to solve this problem, right?
Yes.
And all he's doing is just digging and digging and digging. But right behind him, there's a ladder. We have to look at things differently. If what we are doing right now isn't working, you have to try something else. And I think that we forget that. We just think, well, someday I'm going to keep banging my head against this wall.
Right.
Someday it's going to move. But there's literally a doorway 2 steps over. Do you want to keep doing that? Or do you want to take a step back and look? And we forget that because we think that this is the way. But there's so many ways. And what my way looks like is not going to look like your way, Chris. It's not going to look like your way, Karen. Our ways don't have to look the same. And we forget that too, because we're like, oh, this is working for them. So this is what I have to do. If that's not working, take a step back, because the systems can be as different as night and day. As a story about systems, my husband drove me absolutely insane. He would take off his clothes to go to bed and drop them on the side of his bed every single night. It would drive me absolutely insane. I'm like, there's literally a laundry basket right there.
Come on.
Okay. So obviously I'm like, we need to change the system, but the communication isn't going to change the system. So I supported him. I saw the need. So instead, I brought a laundry basket to the side of the bed, like touching the bed. He cannot get into the bed without seeing a laundry basket and seeing it. Well, he started automatically, without me even saying anything, just moving a laundry basket. Took 2 seconds. Laundry basket, I guess I'll put my clothes in here. Slowly, I just started moving the laundry basket away from the bed. Guess what? Now he always puts his clothes in the laundry basket. It's about changing the system.
That goes back to your other point about how powerful our environment is. And we can beat ourselves up all the time about not doing whatever we imagine that we're supposed to be doing, that internal bar. But if we can just tweak a couple things, it can make all the difference in making that change without even thinking about it. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bethany, you have had such a transformative journey. What does invisible strength mean to you now?
I think sometimes we doubt our own strength. Sometimes we don't think that it's there. But I like to take the perspective of a seed. Invisible strength is just, it's always there. We always have those seeds inside of us. We don't always see the plant and the beautiful thing it's growing into right away, but it's there. It's all about just nurturing it. And slowly those roots will grow and slowly that seed will sprout and it will turn into something beautiful. But everybody has those seeds, everyone. And that is your strength. It's just about nurturing it.
Appreciate that analogy. I saw a funny meme the other day that was like, we're all just house plants. We need grounding, water, and sunlight.
Yeah.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
Bethany, I so appreciate your vulnerability today. Can you share with our community where they can learn more about you and your work and also the Thriving by Nature podcast?
Yeah, so I do have a small podcast. It's called Thriving by Nature. It's on Spotify and YouTube. And my YouTube channel is Thriving by Nature with Bethany Stone. I also have little hot takes on there. They're called Hot Takes Mindset from the Sauna. They're just shorts with me being not super attractive in the sauna, saying things that are supposed to be uplifting. I have a Thriving Every Day. My website is thrivingbynature.com, or you can just search bethanystone.com and I'll show up. I do a drop-in group coaching that if someone just needs support right away, there's availability 3 times a week that I just do drop-in coaching. Those are all the things.
That's a lot of things.
Pretty good stuff.
Thank you very much for being here. Chris, thank you for being a part of this conversation as always.
Oh, for sure. No, it was a real joy and a treat for sure.
Be sure to check out Thriving by Nature and then invigorateyourjourney.com. We provide resources, support sessions, and coaching, as well as anything else you may need. You can always message us. Until next time, take care. Peace.